Is there a name? Edit Bay 1. Edit Bay 1. This is the original.
Stan Porter board.
What do you call it, the Stan Porter board?
Because Stan beat this phone to a pulp one night.
So you notice how they've reinforced this portion of the wall here.
Yeah.
So one day Stan got a phone call that he was obviously
displeased
with. And so we were standing here, and all of a sudden we just heard a crash. And we look over and you see Stan go wham, wham, wham. And he just beat the phone off the wall.
So when they put it back,
they had to reinforce
they had
it.
to reinforce the wall because there's a big hole back there.
And so there were all of us standing
funny.
on the other side of the machine room going, oh my God, what's wrong with Stan? And so we all just stood back and let him calm down. But he was perfectly fine after he hung up with all of us. It was like, what happened? And he just, I can't even remember. And Stan would have his little setup, and he'd have his he'd eat his fruit, he'd have his oranges or whatever he'd eat, and we'd all set up, but we'd be, like I said, running around doing our stuff, and Stan would just sit there and tell us what we're doing right or wrong, and we all just tried to stay out of his way because we saw what he was doing to a phone. Or he told us the story about, I don't know if Kevin reminded you of the story he told us about how he had to remember the story, Tim, where he had to come over here. He was,
Tim Luke,
how are you? He grew up on the farm.
Yeah.
And he had to put his dog down. And he didn't have a gun to put the dog down with. This is a story that we'll all of us always remember. Is that so he shot it with a bow and arrow.
He killed the dog.
And he said it just let out this howl.
It didn't die right away. Let's just say that, according to Stan.
And so again, between the phone and the shooting somebody with a bow.
You just want to stay out of his way.
Oh my God!
He never lost his temper because we had a lot of crazy happenings with high maintenance production people, and he was always cool under fire. And, I just remember he used the word, if Stan was ever like, well, he never lost his temper, but sometimes he'd say criminy.
Criminy.
Yeah.
He still says criminy.
He would say criminy. I still don't know what criminy means, but that was
or Jiminy.
That was the most excited he would ever.
What?
He would say criminy.
Do you remember my dad saying criminy?
No, but I saw. Hi Stan. All right. But I did remember Stan. You one time by what QC was it down there?
Yeah. Yeah,
3, 2.
There was 2 down there, I think.
Before?
Yeah.
By the. And one time you answered the phone. I don't know who you were talking to.
Oh, yeah,
you were
already told
really. Oh, you said that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well,
No, it's your memory. How you remember it?
Yeah.
He was so mad from that conversation. He's like, slammed the phone, and I remember seeing you kicking that side panel, and that side panel started to fall down, and you kind of like held it like that.
Because Neil Diamond used to come in all the time, or when he was doing his videos or his concerts, and Neil Diamond smoked cigars.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember on the 3rd floor that Neil Diamond would sit in one of the edit bays and he'd smoke cigars until you couldn't breathe. So I remember when Stan had to come in and tell Neil Diamond, you can't smoke your cigar anymore. And Neil Diamond was not happy. But Stan was very diplomatic and he was very professional, and he explained, that you can't do this. And eventually, because of Stan, Neil stopped. If anybody else would have told him, Neil Diamond wouldn't have stopped smoking. So
at the time, here what was going on with hee-haw cut-downs, right? Because that was one of the first things, was these big 2-inch quads, right? The big quad things of hee-haw, and it was the syndication stuff. And so you had Andy and Stan and everyone who were running these tapes back and forth from over there when we were across the street at Sunset Gower in the basement, right? And then you had to take the elevator that came up through the, obviously still does, I think, through the sidewalk there, and run these back and forth and that was sort of the first job, if I'm not mistaken. That would have come through here. I know that Bruce said he had an interview with Stan and Andy at that point when he had come around.
And I do another quick little thing that Stan told me way back when he would leave after he was done with his shift, he'd gather all his things, and everybody's saying, "All right, night, Stan, see you later," and he'd kind of sign off, every now and then he'd say, now remember, before he'd let me leave, he'd say, don't breathe the air and don't drink the water. And he'd turn and he'd go for the night. And he'd come back the next day and he'd go about this thing. So every now and then, and that's one of those things that I now pass to my kids. Just that's kind of one of those things that I throw out when we're coming and going. And I always remind them not to breathe air and don't drink the water. But it's a little piece of stand that I'm going to have with me for the rest of my life.
Oh, that's awesome.
I got to get that.